for introducing yourself. So I will now come to the introduction of our speaker. And we have waited 5 minutes, so we can start now. So I would all like you all to meet Mr. Abhinandan Mukherjee, who is a dynamic HR transformation leader with over 19 years of experience in with various other companies like Cognizant and the World Bank Group. So he has worked extensively in human resource operations, technology, transformation, and other global shared services, and helped them modernize their people practices and drive their data-driven decision making. He is also the founder of Talent Synergy, a firm which has been instrumental in building ecosystems that support CHROs and CXOs in areas like capability mapping, upskilling, culture assessment, leadership development. He is also a certified OKR practitioner and an artificial intelligence and machine learning strategist with a keen eye for details and analytics, dashboards, and HR digital solutions. Through this community based learning approach, he empowers young professionals and students to become industry ready by blending practical tools, gamified learning, and real world exposure. Today, he's there to share HR Toolkit for Corporate Readiness with you, equipping you with the same tools and frameworks used by top HR professionals across various industries. Welcome aboard, sir. And we would, um, if you have something to say, we can start off now. I'll share my screen.
Yeah. Thanks, Satakshi, and thanks, Gargi, Prarthana, and Satakshi for joining in and supporting this. Swapnamoy, Sagar, and Shomi, while you heard what I do and what I've done, I think one of the things that is very close to my heart is how can I share my learnings with young professionals so that you don't take 19 years to learn what I've learned, right? And I'll start with a small story on this, on the same lines. So many of you would have heard about this gentleman called Raghu Raman. If you've not heard, look him up on YouTube. Raghu Raman is from has a very strong defense background, and as you all may remember, 26/11 was one of the crucial intelligence failures that happened in the country. Right, 26/11 was the Taj Hotel attack in Mumbai, and after 26/11, Indian government formed a body called NatGrid. If you all remember the reports, 26/11, why was it an intelligence failure? The reason was multiple intelligence bodies within India had had some information about some planning, some things going on, but they never put all of that together, right, and shared with each other, collaborate, and hence it's many times called one of the main failures that led to 26/11. So government formed something called NatGrid, which is National Intelligence Grid. Raghu Raman was the first CEO of NatGrid. So he was brought from the defense to head NatGrid and set it up. And um we don't know what's going to happen or what are the reports that are coming in after the recent attack at Pahalgam. But till before Pahalgam, NatGrid is supposed to put all information together from all intelligence bodies and pass it on to the respective authorities to, take care of or take whatever action. So Raghu Raman shared a story in one of his sharings that he used to be in the army and then he used to practice boxing. So he was learning boxing, and his coach in the army, we all know that you don't ask too many questions, right? So coach, they used to go to this coach in the army and practice boxing. So boxing, we all know, right? There is a boxing punching bag, and then they were asked to take about 10 punches on the bag, and then the coach asked them to go down on the floor like your push-ups, but on one hand go round 10 times in that posture on the ground, and then stand up and again take 10 practice 10 punches, right? And that's what they were asked to do for almost some 2 3 months. they never knew. They knew why they were taking the punches, but they never knew why they were going down on the floor and going round and round. Right. So fast forward the first day on the ring in a live match. Raghuraman says he went in and he got his first real punch from his opponent. Right. So when he got punched on his face, he was having a spinning sensation, so which is going round and round. Typically, I think all of us are Bengalis here, so typically to use the word "jeta mother matha ghora je" feeling, right? So that started happening, and that's when he realized that this was exactly the feeling or sensation he used to have when he went into the training sessions and was going round and round on the floor. So just think about the innovation and creativity of the coach. So the coach took these 16, 17 years or 20 years to learn that a sensation when someone gets hit or spinning sensation, jeta mata ghorar, that can be replicated if someone goes on the floor round and round, and take punches or practice punches at the same time. So typically what happened, by the time the opponent was thinking that Raghuraman is out and he will not be able to recover, Raghuraman recovers much faster and comes back because he's already practiced that, right? So immediately he recovers back and then hits back. And whether he wins or loses that match, I don't remember. But the learning that I took back from that sharing was, how can I bring uh, my learnings and a lot of other people who in my network, my friends and colleagues, ex-colleagues, put all of them into learning capsules and share it with freshers, right, and early professionals, so that you don't really wait 20 years or 19 years to learn those, right? So, but the crux of all of this is that we have to apply many of these. So today, this session is more about sharing three modules. There are five modules overall as part of a learning course that we have, which is I think called Prime or something. That is our HR readiness course. But the course we've culled out the three modules from the course, and we'll share here. We will not take 2 hours. I know it's a non-working day morning, but we'll go ahead with three modules. Satakshi, if you could go to the next slide. We have the
Sure,
agenda
Ravi.
on the next slide.
Yes. One second.
Yeah, so this is hold on. This we go back. I think that has a short agenda of fresher rank. But yeah, I think you all can talk about fresher rank maybe later and tell them.
Okay, this is the
No,
one
no.
that has
Let's go to the yeah. So this is
second
the
slide.
piece, right? So yeah. So here in the agenda, we'll talk about how HR is behaving like an operating system in an organization, right? We all know operating systems and how those enable everything that we want to do. Second is I'm a person, apart from what Satakshi mentioned, both in Cognizant and World Bank, I was part of the global shared services organizations. Uh, First 5 years in my career was pure process, getting hands dirty, doing everything that a HR person can think of, right? And that even, I still remember that we used to make hard copy of the files. So we'll sit in the file room and then file all the papers. And Cognizant at that time was hiring in every year they used to hire almost 10 to 15,000 freshers. I'm talking of 2007 till 2010, 12, kind of, right. So how can we really look at process, understanding how processes are built, because and then HR systems and analytics. The two modules below, which is HR in action with decision making, and what will it take for you to become day one ready HR professional. I chose to keep those. We can do that We can share some summary of that, but that's part of the course, and the workshop will become too long if we try to include those. So these are few things, and please feel free to stop and ask questions at any point in time. Uh, so if we quickly move on, what do I mean by when I say HR as an operating system, right? So yeah, next slide. Okay, so this is about fresher ranks. Yeah. So this one is, HR as an operating system. We will look at how HR is picking up a strategic role, right? So let's say if we start becoming a strategic partner, we also have to understand what's the business strategy, right? How businesses run, what do they do to come up with a business strategy, the mission, vision, all of those, and then come up with how HR will be formulated, right? How HR will be framed, what we'll also look at the HR department structure. I'm sure you know, uh, you all have gone through some of these. So, Shomi, I'm sure you've gone through because I know you've been associated with us for almost 3 years now, if I'm not wrong. But Swapnamoy and Shagor, if you have any of your recent learnings from college as part of your curriculum, please feel free to share or stop and ask questions, right? So yeah, so let's move on to the next slide. So if you look at these, so I've tried and picked up. Most of the things that I picked up here has some reference to some learning material, and combined with my experience, right? What I've learned in the HR department structure, I will show you few things that are best practices across organizations, which is part of a Gartner research material. But I also have a slide which is purely, few slides which I have built over the years across organizations and when I speak to multiple people, right? So if you see this one for HR leaders, right, to become a strategic partner, first they need to understand, the business strategy. Why does the company exist? Why do we how do we operate, and how do we really grow and get to a stage? So typically your purpose, value, mission, vision, those kind of elements, right? What you see in the center is very, very business driven. What you see on the outside, right, are sometimes business elements, but also people elements, right? So if you see talent, if you see learning, all of these two are typically, you know, driven by a HR head or a CHR. So overall, there is definitely a very close alignment between business strategy and HR strategy. And this example shows that the HR strategy comes in after the business strategy is understood and well laid down, right, by the business leaders. So if we move to the next one. So the same points, if you look at here, uh, if you look at the points which has a circle, hollow circle, right, which is under purpose, you will find establishing and radiating the culture, then decision making, structure. These are HR facilitates these, right? HR facilitates decision making, HR facilitates culture in an organization, HR facilitates how organization structure is built, models, all of those. The others, the value point under structure, second point under structure, the entire talent, learning, platform, ecosystem, all of these are actually what HR does, right? Once the four other things are established. So HR takes care of, coming up with a value system, mapping talent to value culture, and then driving those, right? Similarly, what is, workforce planning, then performance management, all of whoever is in HR, that HR actually does all of these in a day-to-day basis. So what each one of us do on a day-to-day basis has to make sense, right, to the overall organization. So this is, and I'm trying to come down from business strategy to what HR drives, what HR helps, and then coming down, how HR comes up with the HR structure, right? Yeah, we can move to the next slide. Yeah. If you see here also, this is the journey, right? This is again, picked up from a Gartner material. We will share these slides with all of you so that at the end you will find one slide with all the links. So if these are open links, then you can go and read those articles also. Uh, so there is an organization goal, then comes the HR strategic goal, and then what does it mean for people or HR as a structure, right? Then comes, what do HR do? So that's your HR activities. And then what does it mean? So that particular activity is done by which function in HR? Now, it is, if you see the HR function or the department, if the sub functions can also, synonymously be called departments. So what does L&D do? From a organization perspective to a HR strategic goal to what does they do for the talent, and then come down then okay, L&D does all of these, and how this also rolls up to the business strategy. Now there is another short story here that why is it very important for each one of us to be clear as to how my work impacts the organization's goals. So I'm sure all of you would have heard about NASA, right? The US Space Research Organization. So NASA, at the time when NASA, they were researching about going to moon, there was this scientist who was walking down a corridor in NASA, in the NASA building, and there was a janitor who was sweeping the floor. So this scientist asks the janitor, saying, "Hey, what are you doing? How are you today? What are you doing?" So janitor says, "I'm good, sir." And he says, "I'm putting man on moon." Now just think how strategic this person, right? The It's not about degrading anyone, but how strategic this janitor also feels, right? About the work he is doing. It can be a very simple task. It can be very hygiene related, which is basic, right? But that person is also very clear that what I am doing today enables people to stay healthy, do research, and hence one day NASA will be able to send people to moon, right? So his answer, really shocked the scientists, and they were very happy that the janitor was also very clear as to how his contribution leads to NASA's goals, right? So that's very important. Every time, whichever organization you work for, right? Be very clear how your day-to-day work contributes to your. Obviously, there's an individual goal, right? But how does that roll up to your team goal, to your sub department, to your department, to the business unit, and then overall organization, right? If you don't do that, what will happen is you will get disengaged very soon. You wouldn't be very excited about the work that you do. Because every day morning, it may look like it's such a mundane task that I come and issue letters to someone, right? I've done that, like I said. I used to go and just sit file. There was one or two of those joinings where 1,000 people joined on the same day in Cognizant Calcutta. Just imagine the sitting and punching holes and filing their papers inside, blank files. But there were few learnings that I picked up, right? So there was this office boy with whom I used to do. He was senior to me as far as the organization and tenure was concerned. I was a fresher, and he taught me the order in which the forms should be filed. So when I used to look through the files, I almost memorized every form. What that section included, all of those. In one of client audits, they asked this question. So 1 year later, I was facing a client audit, and they asked, "Do you capture employment or education gap anywhere?" And there was this HR business partner, with due regards, much senior to me, but he didn't have an answer, right? I remembered that, from the forms when I was sitting in that file room and going through, saying, "Yeah, I mean, we capture that." So, I responded saying, "Yes, we capture that. And when you come to the file room, we can show you the personal file, and you can take a look at how we capture that." So every learning, right, has an application. So don't shy away from learning even small things, right, in life. Yeah. So if we move on to the next slide. So this is a little interesting slide. Again, I picked this up from Gartner. Uh, this is a slide possibly which is maybe the world was just coming out of COVID, and obviously, if you see the points, right, a lot of there's a lot of in-person, office-based, manual processes with semi-automated systems, and decision making is very hierarchical. That's how our HR organizations used to be set up, right? So there is definitely something called a transactional HR, which you see outside, that ring, and then inside the ring there are three parts, right? So market HR will mean any business unit, right? Business facing teams and the HR people supporting them. Innovation, creativity, technology, whatever. I mean, we never had things like transformation technology apart from the large organizations. And then there is a sector HR, which means they can have operations, they can have few of those elements. And transactional elements and is like someone who issues the onboard letter, does onboarding, maybe they do exit interviews, do some uh, issuing of the release letter, those kind of things, right? So this is something that's, let's say, about till about 3 4 years back, right? If we go to the next slide, Satakshi. So if you look at this, right, this agile HR, and these are terminologies that all of you, right, should pick up and learn, remember. Because when you get into organizations, tomorrow, or if you are like, show me if you're already working, you will hear a lot of these terminologies every day, right? Every day in, day out. So what's the HR operating model, right? If you're going to do a smaller organization, which is like a startup, a fast growing company, you will have to start thinking and know these much ahead of time, right? There'll be no time that you will be given to learn these. And that's the intent that we have, right? We give you things that are already happening in the industry. So if you see what happens is HR has to be agile, and keeping that in mind, what could be the HR operating model, which means how does HR function? So HR should have, strategic thinkers saying, okay, how can I solve a problem? Because many times HR teams have problems which are first of a kind. And I'll give you one example. In one of the organizations, for the matter of confidentiality, I cannot name. So, an organization that I knew, the HR team, right, the business partner, and I was, acting as a consultant at that point in time. Uh, they came through a scenario where one of the employees was going through a gender change, a gender transformation. So now just think about this scenario. No one, not even the CHRO or the HR head or the business head, had gone through a situation like this before. Now that's an individual decision, which is the employee, and we had to respect that, right? But that's a huge change. It may look like one person, but the admin head was called in to suggest if this individual, right, changed from one gender to the other and started coming to office, which is in-person work, which restroom will the person use, right? Now that's a big decision, let me tell you, because the same person, right, was using the restrooms of the earlier gender, right, before the transformation, and thereafter, the person would actually use the other restroom. Now, are people okay with that? Are people kind of ready for that kind of change? So at the team level, at the business unit level, a lot of changes had to be planned, and it's a very sensitive scenario, right? First of a kind. Second example, uh, this was in Cognizant, and I don't have such confidentiality to be maintained for this. Cognizant hired first set of uh, they were deaf and dumb, so differently abled, let's call them, right? A bunch of, I think, 12 people, very good, amazing students, amazing results. They were good professionals, well trained, and they were professionals who came on board. Now, what's the readiness for the team to work alongside these kind of professionals? The entire HR operations team went through a sign language training. Again, first of a kind. The HR head took a decision, the global shared services head supported that, and they were brought on board. And believe me, for three of them, I'm still in touch with them. And this incident was back in 2009. So, there are these situations that all of us have to go through. So, how can you be proactive? How can you be agile? Do things which are first time, do it fast, and be able to sustain those, right? So, yeah, next slide, Satakshi. So this is a slide which is again from Gartner. But after this, I have one or two slides which is what I have created myself. So if you see, there is something called on the left. If you see the triangle, typically the operating model or how HR is structured. The orange part is HR business partners, which in the earlier slide you saw as market HR, right? The left corner is the centers of excellence, which are the smaller teams, very, very specialized, and they have various uh, core, very, very focused core deliverables within the organization. Everyone has that, but these teams are smaller teams. And then you have shared services, which typically are the operational units. If you look at the overall, left side, these are three broad groups of people in the HR operating model or how HR functions. And then how does it, pan out, from a HR department structure? So you have a head of HR, then you have, people who are solving problems. So if you see strategic leaders, HR problem solvers, and then the COEs. And then what do we really call each one of these? So right side is typically the roles and left side is the overall structure. This is from Gartner, like I mentioned. Let's go to the next slide, then I can explain this slightly easier. Yeah, so this one. So if you see, here's what I've done. And this is a slide which is this is from my experience and how I've seen organization. In smaller organizations, you may not see these kind of small departments, right? The individual ones. HR does, it's all called human resources and they do everything. But if you look here in the HR department structure, on top, like I said, you have centers of expertise. Now, what are centers of expertise? The examples are performance management, total rewards, what used to be earlier called compensation benefits. Then you have the HR technology, transformation, analytics, those kind of people. You have mergers and acquisition, and then you have global shared services. Global shared services is again broken down into smaller parts, supporting one or more of the COEs or the operational units. So if anywhere, you're asked as to, how a modern HR structure looks like, you all should remember this slide. Now, if you look at the bottom parts, which are employee facing organization, units. On the top, the COEs do not directly interact with employees. They build policies. They basically, drive the organization, the frameworks, all of those process, implementation. But talent acquisition, HR business partners, HR operation, these, the bottom part, right, actually interact with employees on a day-to-day basis. And as part of the global shared services, that's an exception, right? While you see that under centers of expertise, it is actually has smaller sub departments, which if you see, supports one or more of the HR departments. So talent acquisition shared services on the right actually supports talent acquisition, right? Now, what does talent acquisition do? They recruit people. Now, for a recruiter, what is the core role of the recruiter? The core role of the recruiter is to find out the right talent for a particular job, talk to them, convince them, negotiate salary, and finalize the joining date and things like that, right? So there are multiple transactional things that go on in between, like in the initial stage, finding talent, right? Finding these resumes, downloading resumes based on keywords, based on experience, today has been automated. A lot of AI application is happening in that area. In fact, as one of my initiatives, we're actually building a AI, agentic AI model on talent acquisition. After that, there's an interview process, let's say, that has to be set up. Now, the interview process setup has nothing to do with the recruiter's core role, right? But it's very process driven. Unless the interview is set up, the person will not move to the next level. So what happens? Talent acquisition shared services point person comes in. These are also, many of them have applications or systems. Many of them are still done manually. But irrespective of that, shared services comes in and supports that interview setting up and sharing of feedback to the recruiter and the hiring manager. Now, let's say the person is hired. Who rolls out the offer letter? Who does a background verification, right? Who does an onboarding follow up? Because most of the people who don't, many organizations only have 70% of the people joining. Only 70% out of 10 offers that go out, seven of them really, people join. 30% are dropouts. That range varies, right? So you have to do candidate engagement, follow up, all of that. So who does that? There's an onboarding manager in talent acquisition who's allocated. Who does that? So if you see these process-driven roles, transactional, but has to be done, very important, are then transitioned from these core roles to a unit called shared services. And there are obviously sub-departments to ensure that specific groups of people are doing specific roles. So I'll take a short pause. If any of you have a question on shared services or this structure or till now, I can take that. Otherwise, we'll move on.
Does anybody have any questions here?
Not right now, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Sure. So, yeah. So let's move on. Okay. So in this slide, what I'm trying to show is while organizations have departments, function, sub-function, department, sub-department, whatever we call it, right? How does an employee go through the process, and how does the employee relate, right? Because as HR people, we can know compensation benefits, we know performance management, but an employee, whom do they go, right? If they need a offer letter copy, or whom do they go if they need an experience certificate or their pay, let's say pay slip, or once they exit, right, the experience certificate or any of those things doesn't matter to them, right? For them, HR is HR. So that's why we have one role which is called HR business partner, who does front ending of a lot of these employee facing queries. But if I look at the employee's life cycle, so this slide typically shows how an employee looks at his or her own career path in an organization. So they get hired, they get deployed, then they engage, right? So they are working, they have, leaves, they have, let's say, benefits, and a lot of those, the operational things. Then they move on, they either get paid, they get promoted, or they move around, career progression happens, and finally they retire or leave the organization, right? So separation. So from an employee perspective, there are these five broad employee life cycle phases. And what we have tried to do here is whatever we saw in the previous slide, right? We've tried to say, okay, which all departments in HR get aligned with which employee life cycle phase. Now, why is that important? That's important because at some point in time, and I'll show that in some of the future slides, that during the higher phase, there can be multiple departments that are working, right? From what is important for us as HR professionals to be aware is what does the entire process flow look like? What's the overall, what is the success of a talent acquisition? They bring on board or they select the right kind of people for the right job at the right time. Onboarding people, they give a seamless experience to the employee or the candidate during onboarding. Now, if talent acquisition or onboarding do not work hand in hand, both of these together doesn't happen, right? And that happens while the employee is getting hired. So for an employee, when I'm hired and when I come on board, these departments, do not matter. For me, it's HR. So it's important for us to know which all departments lead to which employee life cycle, because from a process setup perspective, right? The roles that typically a lot of you will get when you join organizations will be HR operations, talent acquisition. So Shomi can talk about talent acquisition, let's say, right? But it doesn't mean that she does not need to know what onboarding does or onboarding needs to do. In many organizations, recruiters are responsible even till onboarding and handing over, to the to the hiring manager on the day one. Some organizations which are bigger have different teams. So it's important for us to know, right, this relationship. If we move to the next slide, I think that's pretty much what we had for module one. Yeah. Yeah. Simon has raised a hand. Go ahead, Simon.
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Um, Sir, in the retire post or the retire section of that
Yeah.
slide, there is a point mentioned as post separation.
Yeah.
So, how does that factor into the employee life cycle?
So what happens is, Simon, if you look at organizations, what do they typically do? So employee has a tenure in the organization, right? Starting from hire till they leave. No, once they leave, I'll give you a very crude example. One is you need an experience certificate, right? Now, before leaving the organization, employees will have to go around and say, I have no dues, which means did I return back all the assets? Have I completed all my role, transition? Have I given my knowledge transition, everything? Do I have any assets and all of that? Get a no dues and a clearance. And once they have that, they get the experience certificate. That could be on the last day, or maybe, few days just around the last day. What happens after that is organization one has to pay the dues to the employee, right? Ex-employee. So how do they communicate? And typically what happens is as soon as an organization becomes ex-employee, right? I mean, as soon as I become ex-employee, I don't care whether my payslip is supposed to come from finance or payroll or from HR. For me, I got the experience certificate from HR. I will reach out to HR for everything. So it's the organization at the end of the day, right? So one is their dues that organization has to pay. After next, the benefits, retirement benefits. Now, whether someone retires or just leaves the organization, uh, have you all have read, Provident Fund as a act, right? So you have your PF Act, you have your Gratuity Act, you have your benefits, maybe my variable pay that I was supposed to get for that period that I worked for the last fiscal year. All of that comes back to HR, right? So at every point in time, and believe me, when I left Cognizant 2016, 2014, we started working on so all of these used to come as ex-employee queries, right, as requests. So if I need and then, okay, very important, tax deductions happen. When you go and file your income tax, what do you need? You need a TDS. You need a Form 16 because your tax was deducted in the organization when they paid you month on month. Every fiscal year, you have to get something which is called a Form 16. Who gives the Form 16? Finance and tax team. How is it sent out to the employees? In their email ID. Who is the owner or custodian of the email ID? HR. So HR has to provide the data to finance and tax team saying this is the latest email ID which Siam gave at the time of leaving. And you can send Form 16 to this email ID, right? Same things happen for all of these. So there's a system that we built in Cognizant, and I was in fact, one of the pilot users when I left also, which was active till 18 months after someone leaves the organization, so that they can place a request through this one single window, and that comes in and goes to either finance or goes to HR. Within HR also, benefits team is different, incentive and variable pay team is different. If I have any leave encashment, that's a different team. So all of these, right? 4 or 5 days back, I've left Cognizant in 2016. So 2025, we're in 2025, right? 9 years. I get a message, WhatsApp message from one of the ex-employees saying another ex-employee who is now in Australia needs an experience certificate for Australia PR process. Now, I've left Cognizant 9 years back, but I used to handle that process. So, relationship wise, they knew me. So I reached out. I knew who does this, which is the email ID that HR has, where someone can reach out to these. Now, this person who's in Australia, the government system needs a letter from ex-employers saying during this tenure, these are the kind of work the person did. Now, at the end of the day, it's HR's responsibility. So that person has left about 5 years back. So they will now reach out to HR. HR will go into the HR information system, go through that, and then issue this letter. So this is why ex-employees is a very very big group, very key group. When I was working in World Bank, believe me, in World Bank they call them retirees. Even if you leave and all, that typically their entire group is called ex-employees are called retirees. The entire HR operations system, organization, which is the HR shared services unit, gets 40% of its queries and requests from ex-employees in World Bank. World Bank has a very strong ex-employee, benefit. They have pension, so they have a lot of those. So 60% comes from active employees, 40% comes from ex-employees. So HR has to plan very strongly for the ex-employees. So that's why you see post-retiral as one of the key elements in that.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's quickly move on. Yeah. So the other thing that I feel is very important for anyone who's getting into HR, right, and wants to know more about HR function is how does the process, function? Very important, irrespective of which department you're getting into. Knowing the process, knowing policies, knowing whom to reach out and who can, who handles certain parts of the HR process is extremely important. And these are roles that we also get when we join. So like I said, the first 5 years when I joined Cognizant, initial 2 years, I was in a nodal center, which is Calcutta. After 2 years, I kind of handled everything possible, from the shared services or HR operations point of view, starting from onboarding, even upfront, starting from offer letter rollout to candidate engagement, onboarding, uh, personal file creation, benefits, leaves, everything, exit. Uh, Not so much of performance, but exits again have multiple things. People can resign, people can just leave, which is called job abandonment. Then there are terminations, right? I was also handling background verification from the location perspective. And if background verification comes negative, which means people have falsified information in their applications, we have to go and terminate them. So it's organization initiated. So it's terminations can be disciplinary, can be negative reference check, all of those. Then you have client audits, you have internal audits because all organizations have a compliance typically to abide by and standards. So if you're ISO and all of those. So knowing processes, I think, is very important. But at the core of that entire workflow, right? So you can move on to the next slide. So that actually is how does really processes help, right? So I'm just trying to teach you all to learn how to learn, right? And if you all are ready with that mindset of okay, how a process runs, there'll be an upstream process, there'll be someone who's doing the core process, and then there's a downstream, right? Knowledge of upstream and downstream processes are very important. What part I am doing, someone else would have done the earlier part and handed it over to me. What I do, my output will be someone else's input, right? So if any of you have known process, I mean, frameworks like a Six Sigma and all of these, you learn about SIPOC, which means, there's an input, there's an output, and then there's a processing system, right? So it's applicable for all of these. Output of one process is the input for the next process, right? So knowing how processes work, knowing that there'll be multiple touch points, knowing how to create SOPs. SOPs mean standard operating procedure. Knowing who's responsible for what is very important. That knowledge of the framework is very important, right? So let's move on, Sadakshi. Yeah. So if you look at these again, bringing back the earlier slide that we had, let's again look at the employee life cycle, and each one of these departments or functions, right, will have individual processes, right? So if you think about how a person joins an organization. First of all, business identifies that I have a need of, let's say, Java developer, right? And how do I know that there's a need? Client is asking for a work, or I am having conversations and the client will get signed up. So I will need one person to deliver this much of work. And how do they know that? Because they've been delivering similar work earlier for either the existing client or an or a old client, or even a new client can be a prospect, right? So they identify the skill and they identify how many people are required. Second thing, what happens is they find out people within the organization. Yeah, anyone getting released from any project, some client going away, some project closing down, or anyone wants a role change, then that's called internal hiring. When that doesn't happen, then they go for external hiring, which is recruitment, right? And that's when we go ahead and acquire talent from external talent pools. So if you look at each one of these, identifying the business need, translating that to a HR recruitment goal, right, will be one kind of process flow, versus when a person has submitted resignation, wants to leave, then have a retention discussion, understand why the person is leaving. Is there a possibility for us to retain? Do we want to retain the person? Speak to the hiring manager. If nothing works out, then process the resignation. There's a notice period of 30, 45, 60 days, whatever is the agreed period. The person does a handoff transition, gets a no dues clearance, exit interview happens towards the end of the notice period, and people leave, and then the post separation comes in, right? Now these two processes are completely different, right? So we need to appreciate that each of these functions or points of delivery will have its own process, own policies, and how the process flow happens. For some of them, the input and the upstream and downstream, like I was mentioning, may also not be just within HR. So let's say how is the salary processed, right? For a complement team. So salary has two parts. One is the structure of the salary. Someone has to decide that when Abhinandan gets hired at a particular level, as per Indian laws, this is the structure of the salary that should be given to him. So there can be a overall, let's say, a 10 lakhs he gets a salary. But how will the 10 lakhs get broken down? What are the components? There's a law of the land. That's a one-time exercise. And then everyone who gets 10 lakhs or who's supposed to get 10 lakhs at that level gets that breakup. That breakup has to go into the offer letter, right? So compensation team decides the salary structure. But who is issuing the offer letter? We saw in the earlier slides. It can be talent acquisition teams, or it can also be the talent acquisition shared services teams, right? Who is not a complement person, who doesn't need to know the validity of the structure, who doesn't even need to know whether some components should be there or not, should not be there. So so this is a comparison within the organization, within the HR function. Someone decides the structure, it is put into a system. When I select the level and the overall CTC of the person, the structure will come in and sit in the offer letter. That's how typically systems work, right? Now, there is another part when the salary is getting processed. Once salary is processed, right? And believe me, when my first salary got processed, I thought, I had some 4.25 lakhs or something as the salary. So if I plain divided by 12, right, was my expectation, because that's the CTC, right? And I'm supposed to get by 12. I was taken, by shock because I think I got about 65 or 70%, right? Not even 70, 65% of my calculation in my bank. So any day, okay, and I can give you back this as an exercise. If I give you a compensation, CTC, can you come up with a compensation structure and then calculate how much will someone get into the bank account? Now that, into that comes what? Compensation team decided the structure. Recruitment team put it in the offer letter. After that, the onboarding happens. Someone ensures that that compensation in the offer letter is also sitting in my HRMS, right? Which will now be used by payroll team to process my salary. Once payroll team processes salary, some parts will go deducted as benefits because my PF contributions I never get into my account, right? It's given to the PF fund. My gratuity calculation will be an accrual. I will never get it in hand if I don't complete 5 years or 4 years to 40 days. Let's say my medical insurance premium, I don't get that, right? Organization pays sometimes for those, right? So, and then what happens? It goes to the tax team. Tax team will see what is my bracket of taxable income and then deduct tax and submit it against my PAN and then give me a TDS certificate at the end of the fiscal year. And after that, I get something what is called a net pay in my bank. So if you see this entire thing, there are HR teams, there are finance teams, there are tax teams involved. So understanding how certain processes run has to be very clear, right? And that's where if we move on to the next slide, so actually, yeah, so there are these multiple departments. I thought, why don't I take something which is again from the market? So Gartner Research had this good slide, which just not has the recruitment and those HR functions. It also has some of the initiatives like your diversity, inclusion, equity, those kind of pieces. Very important these days, right? So this is there more for reference. So now if we move down, yeah. So this is where I wanted to just give you some examples of what happens in different functional areas within HR. The key HR process. So let's say in workforce planning, I mentioned about knowing the business need, being able to translate that into one Java resource, right? And I need that by the next 60 days, let's say. So that comes in terms of the demand forecasting, saying how much is my demand. Then my supply analysis is, do I have talent pools? Do I know where to hire from? All of those. Supply means organizations, where will they get the people who will come and work? Demand is the work that has to come in, right? And skill gap analysis is, do the people have the skill sets, all the skill sets that I need to deliver that work, right? So these are processes.
Hello? Hello?
So Takshi, can you hear me? I just got
Yes,
dropped
I
off.
can hear
Back.
you. I
Okay.
was not able to hear you. That's why I thought maybe my something not working from my end. But
No, there
then
was a network drop at my end. So, this slide and I think the next slide also has few of the core processes which are linked to some functional areas for you to go through. Like I mentioned, we'll be sharing this slide pack, so feel free to go through and raise any follow through queries that you may have. But By functional area, there are these key processes that we have listed out. Some of them you'll see automation, and some of those are listed under HR technology innovation. So these are sample processes for you to refer. Believe me, most of these, or if not all of these, are valid on a day-to-day basis. And each one of you have to touch upon these processes more than one, at least every day, whatever your tenure is, right? You can be a CHRO, you can be a HR head, you can be a business unit HR, whatever it is, right? You will need to know these, whatever you do in an organization, if you want to build a career in HR, right? Yeah. So let's move on, Satakshi. Yeah. So this is again slightly generic knowledge, but this we also say, because I've spent a lot of time in HR technology, transformation, process consulting. That's what I continue to do on a day-to-day basis. Uh, if you take these 4, 5 steps, you will be able to create something that we call a process SOP, standard operating procedure. And we've taken an example of one of the SOP buildings in an onboarding process and shown how a standard operating procedure is built. Right. In our full-fledged course, we typically go through this as an exercise for at least one process in each of the HR functional areas. Right. But this is an example which we wanted to uh, include here. So yeah, I think after this we'll have the RACI matrix. Can we go to the next slide? Uh, yeah. So RACI matrix, typically the HR SOP says what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. The RACI matrix calls out who needs to do it, right? So who does what in their overall process? Very important because it's not just the people who are doing the work, it's people who you also keep informed. If it's also people who you are accountable towards, right? So who supports the process, who just needs to be informed, right? I'll give you an example. I think in every organization what happens is, before the variable pay, the incentive letter or a promotion letter, right, goes out as part of the annual process, HR business partners get involved. HR business partners get involved in terms of deciding the compensation, finalizing the structures, promotions, all of that, right? Now, the small team, this is HR operations team, query management team. When the letter goes out, many in that letter, there is a note saying if you have any issues or any clarifications, then raise a query, right? Either speak to your business partner or raise a query. Now, the HR operations team, which is the query management team, suddenly sees a huge inflow of clarification as to why is my calculation not matching. So, what is typically the role of HR query management? They manage queries, but before the letter goes out, while HR business partners are involved, once an FAQ is prepared, think what could be the questions and what are the best possible answers, and that is sent as an information to the query management team. Not only that, I remember in World Bank, there is for active employees, for ex-employees, where the query management team used to be given enough notice so that they have enough people on ground to handle those queries, because many times you don't have enough people to handle the queries. So that's another issue, right? So that's where the RACI matrix becomes very handy and important. Uh, so if we go to the next slide. Yeah, so this is typically how a RACI matrix is created, and again in that one example, I think that we generally do as a activity, we follow these steps, create the RACI matrix for a particular process. Yeah, let's move on. Yeah. So this is typically, the module two, that process mindset, knowing that there are multiple touch points in a process, which can be across HR teams, which need not only be HR teams, it can also be, other teams in the organization. And then how to create an SOP and a RACI matrix. Let's move on to the next module. I think we have one module left. Yeah. So this is. Let me start with a question that someone asked me just 2 days back. So one of the interns, I was doing a process, right? Interviewing a project intern. So she asked me that what kind of systems should I start learning. So I was telling her that, rather than learning individual systems, please note that there are types of systems. So what you see as the first point here, that HRIS, ATS, LMS, PMS, these are all types of systems that organizations use. HRIS is HR information system, ATS is applicant tracking system, LMS is your learning management, PMS is performance management. Now, why do we need all of these systems? To manage and be able to handle the process, employee information, all of those, right? So my answer to her was, first get to know the different types of systems that are available, that organizations need, and how do those function. Now there can be multiple applicant tracking systems. Something can be done by Oracle, something is done by Zoho. These are two different companies. Both of them have an ATS. If we know what is the core functionality of an ATS, we will be able to anyways handle any of these, because you don't know which specific system your organization will have, right? But at least you know that what is an ATS. So when you join the organization, then you are able to handle the queries and then learn that exact specific system. If you know broadly that what an ATS does, it manages the candidates, the candidate information here, it continues to hold the candidate information, and we candidate life cycle flows through the ATS, right, which is called applicant tracking system. And then we'll go through people analytics introduction, and then what are typical metrics in organizations, right? So if we move on, okay, again, so this is my favorite slide. So this is again back saying, organizations have different HR points of delivery, sub-function in organizations in HR. So if we move to the next one, I have one interesting slide. Right. So keeping the HR sub-function or department structure, right? If you see below, right, then there are different systems for each of these functional areas. Yeah, Shapnamai, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, sir, disturbing. Sir,
Yeah,
actually, the deploy part is written assimilation training. Can you please explain what is it? Assimilation training.
yeah. The assimilation, comma training. Okay, so it's not assimilation training, it's assimilation, comma training. So see, assimilation in big organizations, see the role is performed in every organization. Why have I called that out? When a new joiner comes into the organization, right, someone has to guide them, right, as to, okay, where will you sit? It could be simple things. On day one, where do you go? You don't know that before you are joining, right? Someone has to tell you, okay, I have 5 offices in the city. Your team sits in, let's say, in Newtown, right? And when you go to Newtown, go to this block, go to this floor, go to this bay, meet this person, right? Now, before you go and meet this person who is your team lead, come to the HR block, which is some other block, go to this person and complete your joining formalities. So there's an onboarding, there's a form filling and all of that happens. So once the form filling happens, someone will also confirm to the payroll team that this person joined today. So Abhinandan joined today. And then they come back and start, they go into the business unit, right? Go to the hiring manager or the team lead. Now, on the day of the team lead does all the work, right? They will start giving orientation about the work, about the client, about the project. But let's say uh, the person has certain skill sets, but has to go through some basic training, which was already agreed upon, right? Or there's a mandatory training program. So a training module is allocated. Now, which system do you go and take the training? Someone has to tell Abhinandan, no, that this is the system, these are 5 trainings you have to go through. So there's an orientation program. So when you go through an orientation program, mostly HR does the first corporate orientation. And if there's a business unit level orientation, then that is done by someone in the business unit, right? Yeah. So that part, when you gradually bring someone to into the organization, onboarding typically is a term used till day one, which means the person comes and joins. That is the day of onboarding. Sometimes it is also, there's a phase called pre-onboarding where they fill up certain forms, go through some information beforehand. That is called pre-onboarding. The day of joining is called onboarding. After onboarding, the person is still new. There has to be a, some kind of settling in period. That is called assimilation period. So I had the fortune of working for Cognizant, which had a global assimilation team, which was almost some 20-member team only in India, right? To guide people, guide new joiners. Out of the 20 people, two of them were very senior people because they used to handle the assimilation of senior leaders who are joining. So during the onboarding phase or an assimilation phase, after the person joins, maybe a 30, 60, 90-day period is called an assimilation phase or an assimilation period where you may need to guide the person. Many organizations have a buddy system where you are allocated a buddy. You have any problem, you go to that person, right? They are experienced people who are in the organization who will tell you. Apart from that, there are orientation programs, learning, training modules, which give the person some comfort to settle down and start becoming productive. So that's the assimilation phase. That is also applicable for someone who's moving across geographies. So let's say I am existing in the organization, but now I'm selected for an on-site role and I have to move to US. I have no clue of what to do, right? That's a foreign land. So you go, do some visa formalities, go report to the Ministry of Labor, do da 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 da, then go to the client. So who does that? There's an assimilation team which helps the person through that process.
Okay, sir. So actually, we have covered some topic in mentoring in our semester. That is
Mm.
one thing is mentioned in mentoring, that is buddy system.
Yeah.
The buddy particularly what exactly is the similar to the assimilation. I mean, buddy was on the person who actually helps the new hire employee to
Correct.
adjust and adapt the environment. So similar type of
Correct.
work is done in assimilation, right?
So typically what happens, body is a person. So that phase is called assimilation, Swapnama. The phase during which you are after onboarding, after day one, right? That phase is called assimilation, that time period. The body is the person who can relate to what you're asking. So body is not necessarily from HR. So if you're joining, let's say a business team, which is BFS developer team, right? A buddy will be someone who is from your team or someone years ahead who know the process, who can help you, guide you. So buddy is like my pal. If I have a problem, I'll go and ask this person. But that person need not be your HR point of contact. That person need not be your onboarding or the recruiter. A buddy can be anyone. So organizations, what they do is they create a system where I can volunteer to become buddies, right? I want to contribute. I want to help new joiners. So I'm an existing person, let's say. So I will go and put in my nomination saying I'm available to become a buddy. When a new joiner comes, I will be allocated to one or more new joiners saying, okay, for these 3 new joiners, Abhinandan will become the buddy, which means they have any problem, they are not able to find the leave application system, they don't know how organization canteen runs, whom to raise a complaint, how to give a feedback, how does the performance management process run. for anything, they can go and ask the buddy. The buddy's point is buddy need not know everything because they are again not HR people always, right? But the buddy can guide as to, okay, sometimes people don't even know who their HR business partner is. The buddy can go and say, okay, you know, let's say Satakshi is your HR business partner. If you have a problem where your leave system is not working, is not activated, no problem. Just talk to Satakshi. She will help you out, right? So that's a buddy, right? So buddy can be anyone in the organization.
Thank you, sir. Got it.
So if you see, coming back to this slide to quickly close this, if you see for talent acquisition onboarding, there are multiple systems which are in action, right? So there's a career portal where jobs are posted. ATS I spoke about, right? Onboarding is again, onboarding system. I have to fill up some forms, upload documents. My background verification system is different. So all of that is your, during the talent acquisition and onboarding phase. Similarly, there are separate tools and platforms for each of these systems, and these support the data, these support the, let's say, processes for each of these phases. So, which means, let's say, if I go to my attendance and leave tracking system, right? If I have a leave application to make, I will go into that system, right? If I want to understand my personal records, right? What is my passport, right? So once it happened that someone actually lost their entire documents, so they went into the digital file, raised a request, and we gave them a copy of all the documents which they used to go and apply for duplicates and get reissued, right? So each of these systems have different needs, but each of these functional areas also own up. Compensation team owns up the compensation and payroll data, right? Benefits team owns up the benefits data. That is why you see individual systems lined up or mapped to each of these life cycle phases. Compensation data is not owned up by onboarding team. Compensation team owns it up. They are responsible to design compensation. If some point in time any audit happens, they are answerable, right? Onboarding team is responsible to maintain the data of how many people are joining, how many people are supposed to join, send a report, and then be ready to onboard or welcome those people, right? So they have their own systems. Has all the pre-onboarding forms being filled up? Have we signed all the documents? That is the onboarding team's responsibility. Their systems drive those data points. So that's why there are multiple systems in the organization. Yeah, we could move on quickly. Who's off? Yeah. So I think people analytics, I'm sure you all have heard about people analytics. Apart from, the HR systems and, those pieces, HR analytics, talent analytics, workforce analytics, people analytics, whatever you call it, largely it's the same thing. HR analytics will have HR data. Workforce analytics will have certain bigger data set, workforce management, workforce planning. We talked about those. And people analytics, talent analytics are almost synonymous, right? So it's basically collecting, maintaining the data, and seeing how the organization performance can be enhanced through the data. Uh, yeah, let's move on. So then this slide and next two slides again give a little bit of more information on some key matrices across HR functions or types of matrix, right? If I look at recruitment, that's a function. Recruitment function has certain matrix. Every organization ke to other success measured determine korte have, right? So to determine the success of a recruitment team, they have these matrices saying how many people. So let's say external hire rate. You see that in number 2 under recruitment. This means that how many people am I hiring from outside? And if you see internal movement in under number 3 is internal hire rate. How many people am I hiring or finding within the organization to fill an open position? Why are these very important? Internal hire rate, if that is high, which means I am reutilizing resources, It comes at a much cheaper cost. একটা project থেকে আরেকটা project reallocate করতে গেলে there is almost no cost. But as soon as we want to hire someone from outside, there is a cost. It's a cost per hire. So it's a high cost if I have to hire from outside. If I'm able to get someone from internally, I might have to just have little bit of cost towards training. May not be that also, right? So each of these matrices decide the success measure of each of these functions or areas of matrices, right? So that's largely what this does. While we share the slides, you feel free to go through, and or if you have anything that you've already learned and you want to ask around similar ones, please feel free to do that, right? So we'll take a pause after this. I think it's we just said I thought it'll become too large, too much to have modules 4 and 5. But yeah, that's part of the course that we have. Anyone interested in that, I think we will probably open the course up in a few weeks time, but we'll let you know. But anything related to this, the floor is open. Please feel free to ask questions, share anything that you have, and uh, we'll also kind of share the deck. So anything that comes up later, please feel to send an email, and we can always respond to that.
So are we will stop the presentation?
Yeah, we can stop the presentation. Swapnamay has some question. Go ahead.
So, is the HR analytics and the people analytics both are same, or any differences there?
So I'll tell you. See, HR. What are HR departments? HR departments are the recruitment. Let's say HR operations, business partnering, compensation benefits, performance management, merger acquisition. These are HR departments, right? If you look at a small organization, workforce planning is also done by HR. Or the same person who is doing HR is also doing workforce planning. In bigger organizations, workforce planning becomes a different team. They work with the business teams to understand the business projections and then come up with the workforce planning. Right? So what does workforce planning mean? It means that how many people will I need tomorrow or next quarter? What skill sets should they have? Which locations should I have them? That comes from the business projection. So that's called workforce planning. Similarly, let's say immigration or global mobility. This is a department which is very key in terms of resource allocation or resource movement across geographies. They are also called people department. They may not be HR because they are not typically human resources professionals in bigger organizations. In a small organization, you will see person who's an HR business partner or HR operations person doing that role, ensuring that visa is processed, ensuring all the onboarding things in the new location is processed. But in bigger organizations, you have a specific team. So if you look at HR processes, workforce processes could include some or people processes. When we call workforce, people, talent, we use these kind of terms. It gives a little broader, scope. So it's not just HR. It are the other people functions, which could be workforce management, which could be immigration, which could be mergers and acquisitions, or any of those kind of things. So sometimes these terms are used to indicate that the scope of the analytics or scope of the processes involve all processes, not just HR. So HR could become one of the people functions.
Okay, sir.
Anybody else has any
Yep.
other questions regarding today's um, discussion? Sagar or Shomi, Sam, anybody? Yeah, Shomi, go ahead.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah, Shomi, go
Okay.
ahead.
So I believe that this workshop has already provided some valuable insights for MBA students and who are trying to switch their career to HR domain, like Mr. Shakur Bishash. So here my question is on behalf of fresher, as I have already faced before starting my career. And the question is that about choosing the sector or industry for HR. Like someone will say that manufacturing is industry is the best for HR, and someone will say about IT or any some other sector. So during this phase, I feel that freshers might get confused about what to choose. So if you could give your insights or suggestions, it will be beneficial, I believe.
So Shomi, thanks for asking that. Uh, so this is exactly what we do in our HR employability assessment. Uh, Let me give you an example. I cannot directly say who is meant for what and who should select what, right, in terms of the sector. But few skills and few acumen, my liking, all of that put together, you can take a call which sector I would want to work for. So I'll give you an example what we do in our HR employability assessment. So we have an employability assessment which is generic, which gives you your readiness for day one uh, across 14 core skills, that is learnability, agility, critical thinking, those kind of skills. There is another assessment we have, which is we call an HR employability assessment. So in that, what happens is there is this functional area called labor laws. So we go through all the HR functional areas and ask certain questions to understand the acumen of the freshers, to understand their knowledge, to understand their ability to apply their knowledge. These three things. So what they like doing, what they don't like, what they know, and how are they able to apply what they know. These are areas that we test in that HR employability assessment. In that, when we generally recommend, so once someone takes the assessment, what happens is they get a HR employability score. If someone takes the detailed scorecard, there are some sample roles that we recommend for that person at the entry level. That includes roles like, let's say, HR compliance officer or HR executive. If you look at it, someone who is very strong in labor laws and is able to apply, is able to have good negotiation skills. And that is why we always recommend our SSCs to take the generic employability assessment and the HR employability assessment together. So if I know that someone's negotiation skills are very high, they're good negotiators, right? Sorry. And they're very good in labor laws. They're able to apply, they're able to talk through, apply the labor laws, knowledge, compliance, all of that is very high. For them, we will generally recommend a labor intensive sector, which is manufacturing, which could be civil, those kind of infrastructure organizations. Someone in these sectors may not always also need a very high level English speaking capability. With all regards to everyone, these are realities. A particular manufacturing unit in one part of India may actually have a very strong local language need. So when we look at the communication, right? So let's say Abhinandan has okay communication as far as English is concerned, but he's able to convey his ideas, his messages, right? Then he's good enough fit for a manufacturing, right? But if communication is very refined, labor laws is not very strong, they know policies, they know labor laws, but they're not able to always apply. But they can go find out. So the application area is slightly lower, but they're very good, let's say, in communication, in designing communication, in relationship management. That is another skill. That is when we recommend HR business partner role in a service sector. So typically what we do is we look at the combination of the skills or in our employability assessment that we have, the generic one and the HR one, and give some indicative roles. Each of these roles, right, have a very strong sector orientation. So HR executive is typically in a service industry, which can be banking, IT, ITES, those kind of roles. HR compliance officer or labor welfare officer, labor officer, these are again very, very manufacturing organization driven roles. So that comes up as an indicative. So, even without taking our assessments, my take will be, if you're open to actually go sit down in the mills, sit down along with the workers, and you don't care about, getting your hands dirty, that should be your attitude, right? And be open that ways. But if you ask me to give an indication, once someone takes our employability assessments, these kind of indications we try to give.
Okay, I got my answer.
Anyone else?
Great. Uh,
Sam?
yeah, go ahead, sir.
So the indications which you talked about, or the competencies which we will get after an assessment is taken. So this can also be specifically based on the knowledge or expertise that particular employee has on any subject. So if my inclination is, let's say, towards uh, training, HRD training, okay, but I am also very well versed with labor laws. So during
Yeah.
the assessment, it may come off as I am a very strong holder of legal knowledge, but my inclination is not towards that side. So how will I tackle this problem?
So in which case, the typical, see, what we are trying to do here is we are trying to, pick up two things. One is indicative, saying what are the areas you need to improve upon, right? We are not in any way saying that if you if you have certain roles that we see that you are very strongly, you have an affinity, you have an ability to pick up, you may not get those roles also. No? The industry is evolving, and those roles may not be available. So what we are trying to say is, okay, these are roles that you are ready for, but these are areas which you're not good at, which means that you need to, go through some of the modules, either have conversations, pick up knowledge from people, get to know how to apply those. In fact, we used to have a, HR readiness course also, right? So typically what we try to do is give you that awareness. So it's purely saying what you're already ready for and what you need, get better at. So that's the pure play intent, Sam. But I always encourage and say this to every HR professional that I talk to, saying HR doesn't do strategic stuff. Believe me. Even if you saw in my slides, strategic HR and all of that, we do small stuff. We do very, very basic stuff, but we do it diligently, right? That's why HR stands apart, because no one is ready to do that dirty job, right? No one is ready, believe me, to go and tell someone. And I had to do that in my career. Just about 3 months into my HR career, I had to go and stand in front of 12-year experienced person and tell that person that you falsified information, challenge them, speak to them, get them to agree, and then terminate them. Believe me, the hiring manager will not do it. You have to do it. And you have to do it with all respect, all due respect, right? I mean, just because the person has falsified information doesn't mean you can misbehave with people, right? At the heart of heart, you need to still have the EQ, because you're terminating someone, you're taking away their bread and butter, right? But still, you have to do it as a person. So I think that's what, if you get things right, or whatever opportunity you get, you should pick up, right? That's for me, for any HR, anyone who's trying to come into HR. But yeah, I did hear that Swapnamoy has done, let's say, he's a systems engineer or systems analyst, right? So if he has an acumen towards HR technology, and if those roles are available, he might want to pick those up, right? If you are good in communication, you want to become, you're good at talking to people, negotiation, street smart. I heard Sagar was in sales and he's moving into HR. Believe me, recruitment roles in HR are more of sales than any HR. Shomi can tell you that. It is typically your sales and negotiation skills at play, along with definitely, knowledge of the skill sets, sourcing, matching, how you do all of those. Recruitment roles are purely sales roles in organization. How are you selling the organization to the employee, to the candidate, right? So with all of those, I think, anyone should pick up all the roles that come their way. But yeah, I mean, you could always have options of, to choose and build upon areas that you're not good at.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else has something to ask? We're really getting some great ideas from Abhinandan sir, like specifically on the changing aspects and how do you adopt small changes and the various in detail aspects of HR, his personal journey, all of that. So if there's something that you guys want more clarification on, or else we'll yeah, Sam, go ahead.
Yes, sir. I would like to ask a question about the part where you had to talk, when you said you were 3 months in and then you had to relay that information. So, sir, why will the hiring manager or whoever was your supervisor make that decision of giving this very important role to someone who has just joined the organization? You said that no one wants to get their hands dirty, but likewise, if someone, like this, let's say I am the supervisor, I would understand the importance of that person. You said he has 12 years of worth of experience. So why will I just an intern or a new joiner to relay this information? Because that is not a nice step.
Yeah. So thanks, Saim, for asking that. So let me tell you for two reasons why you need to do some of these very early in your career. One is because that's the role you're hired for. I had 2 years of experience prior to that, prior to my MBA. So one, definitely I was the senior person in the team as far as overall work experience is concerned. So typically your role entails doing those, right? You are hired to do background checks to handle the exit process, right? So your role demands. Second is someone giving you that opportunity, right, to apply the levels of maturity that you picked up. So no one is saying that you fly an aeroplane without getting a pilot license, right? But still, the pilot has to sit in the pilot seat to really know how to apply the knowledge learned. So the analogy that I'm trying to create is I was given the training to handle these in the first 3 months. And the role demanded. So if you put these together, my manager said, I will be in the room, but you drive the conversation. And that's what typically, if you see in an aeroplane, what happens is, some time back, I had this passion about all air crash investigations. Do you all know that typically, mostly, right, there's a senior pilot and there's a co-pilot, right, in any of the, any of the flights. The landing and the takeoff used to be done by the senior pilot many years back. After few major air crash investigations or air crash happened, investigations came up and all of that, what many of these flying aviation governing bodies that are there, right? There's FAA in US, there's DGCA in India. So few of them came up with that, assumption or the inference that the senior pilot should not do the takeoff and the landing. That should actually be handled by the co-pilot, because if things go wrong, the more experienced person is on standby to look at holistic things and then get things right. And that was a learning happened after a few air crashes happened. So if we see and apply that analogy, I was given the training. My role demanded me doing that activity. but I was still given the training and the inputs how to handle it. My senior was around and said, okay, you drive the conversation. If things go wrong, I'll step in. And that's how I also quickly learned, picked up, made best use of the opportunities, and then grew in my career.
Anyone else? We're getting to learn a lot from you, Abhi, from this session and from your personal insights as to how your journey was, what all you learned from the starting till now. So it's a very insightful session. So if there's nothing else, then we can call it a wrap.
We can close. So let's send the few things. One, the slide pack. I think we can send a version to them, so we can do that by tomorrow, day after. And I think let's also send some feedback link to people who've joined.
Sure. Yes.
And yeah, and I think we should release the HR employability assessment and send those links also to everyone, just in case. All of these are kind of free, so please feel free to make use of these and send it to people that you feel can benefit, your friends, family, colleagues, whoever. Great. Thanks everyone. Thanks guys for joining. Thanks Satakshi, Gargi, and Pratana for supporting this. Have a nice day ahead, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining
you.
us.